Good evening and welcome everyone. I'm Eddie Shanahan. It's my pleasure to introduce you to four very interesting artists and craftspeople in another of our Meet the Makers events as part of the Craftlink project developed by Offaly Development Company and Westmeath Community Development in partnership with Leader in Finland. The overall project is funded through the Rural Development Leader Funded Programme. Our guests this evening are Anne-Marie Lawler, maker of the luxurious collection known as Luna Skincare, Hazel Green, an accomplished artist and award-winning accessories designer. Claire Guinan is an artist, illustrator and jeweller. And Helen Conneely is owner and sculptor at Celtic Root Studio, working through the medium of bog oak. I should tell you that if you have any questions for our makers tonight, just type them into the chat and hopefully we'll have time to respond to you as the evening progresses. But I'm going to start off with you, Anne-Marie, and ask you to tell us what you do and how you came to be involved.
Okay, so I'm Anne-Marie. My company is Luna Natural Soap Company. It all started just over 10 years ago. I was at a market and I came across these soaps and they were very ornate and I was just fascinated. So I set about finding out how these are made, and I think at the time nobody would teach you how to make soap, so I had to travel to the UK to learn a little bit more and to train. And so from there, I started just as a hobby making soap until my son was born with eczema, and so we tried everything. He had to have steroid cream, so I said there has to be some alternative. So that's when I researched more into the soap that I was making, and came across some goat milk, which I knew was fantastic.
That's the magic ingredient, is it?
Yeah. So I knew it was fantastic to drink it, but you couldn't get a 2-year-old to drink goat's milk soap, you know. So we put it into the soap with a few more skin healing herbs, and that was it. The eczema cleared up in a week. It was nearly completely gone in 2 weeks. It was topical, and so it was all over his face, and that's how it all started. So for us.
And I was going to ask you, when you went to the UK to train, like what was the secret of the success? But you created your own one through goat's milk, yeah.
Yeah, so it was more of a hobby that I did travel to the UK to learn how to make soap. When my son was born with the eczema, that's how everything else came about to be.
And did that trigger you offering it out to a wider market?
Yeah, so other people would say they had dry skin, or they had, like, there was herbs in it, so it started giving it to friends and family, and then it just started off from there.
But this morning when I was looking at your website, you have a beautiful website, but what really caught me was the beautiful ingredients that are sort of splashed right across your product range. Like I was taken in particular by the rose petals embedded in one of the soaps, and those what are they, fronds of lavender that you put on top of it?
So everything in the soap is natural. All the colorants are natural. And so I thought, why not bring some decoration that's natural as well to the top? So there are some of the rose petals, rose buds, lavender buds. They're just they bring the soap alive to me, rather than just a plain bar, which is lovely as well. So everybody has different taste, you know. So to me, I think it brings the soap alive, and that's what I like to do.
But if somebody wants just plain bar, they still get the magic ingredient in it, But I think there's some examples there on the table, but I think when people see the beautiful colours and the natural aspects of it, they'll be drawn very much towards that, particularly at Christmas time. Hazel, what about you? How did you become involved? Was art your first career choice, and how did it expand to become also an accessories collection?
Yeah, no, I was in regular corporate land, administration and finance, and it was fine. It was good. It's a lovely career path, and part of my work would be planning, budgeting, dreaming, and working things out in your mind. And I always loved art. Art was always my hobby.
So you left the planning and budgeting behind and you went dreaming and took on it.
You have to take that leap, and you know, you have it in your mind and you have all these scenarios played out, but you do have to take that leap of faith, and you know, if you want to start out on your own. So we built a studio because where we were before was a fine place, but it didn't lend itself for studio and parking and whatever. So I also wanted to teach, like to teach people painting, to share that. So we built a studio and we have art classes, so that was lovely. But I've been making scarves even before that. I love to paint and play with colours, and it must be back 20, 30 years when I made my first scarves. And I used to wear them for work because it's a great uniform for a woman in the office, in work. It's a light scarf, or at least this particular one is a light scarf that you can wear inside your blouse or inside your jumper. Mm-hmm. So I've been making those for a long time. I sent them first to a friend of mine in America. Used to share a flat with her in Dublin. And I sent it to her for a Christmas present, and she says, "Oh, send me more of these. I can sell them." So my first sales were international. They were in New York, New Jersey.
And tell me this: was your scarf collection always derivative of your art collection? Because
yes, it was.
You take sections of your art and you translate those into the beautiful scarves.
Yeah, I have two lines in the scarves. Ones are hand painted, so they're a very fine scarf, very light scarf, and others are printed, and I print my designs or create designs from my paintings, mostly watercolor paintings and paintings on silk itself, and create the designs and print those onto silk.
So do you produce seasonal collections, or do you just create them when you find that the work, the artwork you're doing translates easily from your art practice?
I would create them constantly through the year, but if you have a special photo shoot or something that you want to bring a collection together, or you want to create looks that look good together, then I would go back through my paintings. I always paint for fun, so they might not be complete works of art that you send into a gallery to exhibit, but particularly watercolor paintings lend themselves beautifully to printing on silk.
Because and movement in the fabric and
the color and the blending of the colors.
And with regard to colors, then you obviously ignore the so-called fashion palette, and you just do something very specific to yourself and your artistic mood at any one time. You don't slavishly follow fashion.
No, I don't. I think it's far more important, particularly for a scarf, to complement the skin color. It's far more useful to a woman to have a color that suits her, and then she can change the color of her jumper or whatever as fashions, but that the scarf complements her complexion. Although I love wild colors, bold colors, they have to be wearable.
And you're wearing not one but two pieces of your own creation, because recently you've also expanded into commissioned pieces, so you're now making dresses as well.
Yeah, the dresses are very light dresses. This one's chiffon silk, so it can be layered. You can wear something underneath it, or you can be very daring and not. but yeah, it's just it's a way of wearing your scarf. Another way of wearing your scarf that.
And Claire, you've an artistic background as well, but more than that, you create jewelry collections. You're an illustrator, and you also create artwork.
Yeah.
But you've a particular inspiration you lean on from time to time, and that's music and poetry.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that, how that inspires your work.
Well, with my jewellery, I look at the lyrics and I try to make them into pieces.
Do you have a favourite artist that you look to? Like, would you look to somebody like Leonard Cohen and that beautiful poetic songwriting of his, or would you be more in a folksy vein of thought?
I have I went through a phase of his work. I'm currently going through a phase of Sleeping at Last. The lyrics are quite beautiful in that. I'm going for the older kind of music, I think.
As in music of the 50s, 60s?
Yeah, that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. And I just think the lyrics, there's a few of the newer artists that I'm looking at as well, but when I hear a song, I have to kind of listen to it hundreds of times before I, to kind of get the ideas and stuff.
And does the artists themselves ever inspire the piece as well?
The musicians themselves?
Yeah.
Yeah, I made a piece there. John Sheehan wrote a poem, and it was about Bernie asked him how to hold a pleck, and he said it was like a bird. So I put a little bird on a pleck.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's probably the only artist, maybe.
And just personally, if you were listening to music in your studio, maybe if you were painting or if you were doing an illustration, what would you listen to?
I do have like around 100 playlists at the moment for different moods that I'm in. Sometimes, like when I was doing the portraits of musicians and stuff, I sometimes, if the painting was annoying me, I put on the music to try to paint it, or, but I usually just listen to the playlists. And
now, you also enjoy working on commissions, and particularly commissions to be infused with memories to mark special occasions. What was the most unusual request you ever got to do a commission like that?
Oh,
I presume it's very often for the birth of a baby or for a wedding or an engagement or something like that. But is there one that sticks out in your memory as being special or very unusual?
One of the last pieces I made was it was based on bubbles, and it was for the grandmother asked me to make a piece for the daughter, and it was for a little baby that had passed away.
Oh my goodness!
So,
yeah.
The bubbles was to that reminded the mommy of this little baby, and I put stones in that had memories from them well, and it was engraved at the back and everything. I think just because that was one of the last pieces that I kind of made, that kind of stands out a lot.
Well, we're going to talk in a moment with Helen about stones with engravings on them as it happens. Helen, what inspired you to set up the Celtic Roots Studio?
Yeah, my journey goes back over 30 years. And when I say this, I say to people, I started when I was really, really young. So I don't age myself. So I guess I started on the bog.
How long ago was that now?
That was 30 years ago. Yeah, so I started on the bog. I had graduated college and I started as a young engineer with Bournemouth on the bogs up in Mount Dillon in County Longford. And at that time, it was great. You were given a motorbike to get across bogs. I was looking at engineering stuff. So as I was out on the bog on this motorbike, and it was the time of Eat the Peach. Do you remember that?
Yes,
film?
I do.
Yeah, I just thought it was the biz to be out on
You
the
didn't
bog.
try that, did you? No.
No, that's not that I'm going to admit in case any of my old colleagues. Anyway, I'd come across the bog timber, and I'd come across, I had actually met then Michael Casey, who was actually on the edge of Mount Dillon bogs, who was probably one of the first with Ronnie Graham to start carving bogwood, and that was like, in the late 80s. And so time went on, and I had left Mount Dillon and the bogs, and anyway, Bournemouth, a couple of years later, was looking at doing projects on corporate social responsibility, and one of them was utilising the bogwood. And so therefore, I was in the company, and I was about to leave, and there was a whole idea of setting up a small little incubator program to see could they do something with the bogwood. And I'd always been interested in art, and I had, I suppose, technically, I was able to look at how things work. So combining with that, we took over an old workshop at Lee Monaghan, which we had right up until last year, or the year before last, and we set up a sculpture studio there, and we literally started to learn how to carve the bogwood, how to dry it over a couple of years. Look back on what was done. I mean, bogwood had been used in the 1850s and 60s for just basic furniture. It had been used, though, like around 1850 to 1900s by the Anglo-Irish for mourning jewellery. After Queen Victoria died, she had started wearing mourning jewellery, and there was an Irish equivalent in bogwood.
And did you make that?
Her stuff or a new version of it?
We're still trying to find out when you start.
Oh yeah, no.
Let me just go
yeah.
back for a moment, because you've been talking about the bogwood,
Yeah.
and maybe people don't realise that's 5,000 to 6,000 years old,
Yeah,
isn't it? And,
yeah.
and it develops in a particular way.
Yeah, so I mean, not going too in depth, but like after the Ice Age, all of Ireland was covered with trees except where we had lakes. And the lakes obviously were filled with water, and over time there was different climate changes, but you had around 5,500 to 6,000 years ago, there was, the kind of climate dried up, so the trees, the lake went down, trees started to grow on the landscape, climate change again, the water started to rise, but now you had trees and plants and shrubs that were trying to fight for survival. The trees didn't survive, but the plants that did became what we know as like sphagnum mosses and stuff that can actually take the water in. So plants that couldn't survive were pushed under the surface with the trees. There was no air, so it kind of started, the water was acidic, so it started to preserve everything. So like as man moved onto the landscape, everything that happened, this layer of dead plants started to grow and cover them. So I think the bogs are magnificent in the sense that they are a memory bank for everything and who we are. In the Midlands, they're 30 foot, 10 meters deep. So you have over 10,000 years. You have just, they encapsulate everything that we did. So you have bog bodies, butter,
layers of history.
And at the very bottom, you have these beautiful trees that were preserved for those 10,000 years because the bogs in the Midlands are so deep. Now, across the west of Ireland and the south, you had shallower bogs, they're called blanket bog. And that's when in the 1850s, when people had no access to land, they would go out into the bog, and where there was no dew in the morning time, they knew that there was bogwood there. So they used it for gate posts, they used it for rope. The pine is kind of resinous and ropey, and they used it for thatching. So kind of, as we moved on, that part of the bog timber that were kind of associated with deprivation and famine. And then part of Queen Victoria and the Irish version of them being used as mourning jewellery was kind of something not of our history. So I suppose in the 1950s, Bord na Móna came into existence to develop our bogs commercially, to have independent fuel. The first thing they had to do was drain the bogs. So there was 50-foot wide fields that they started to dig ditches, very large ditches, and they started to cut on this timber which was in their way. So, and it took them 7 years to drain the bog, pull it out, left it on headlands, and that was left until the 1990s when we started our studio.
And it began to dry there naturally.
Started to dry, and if it dries too quickly, it fragments. But if it's kind of left and you dry it slowly and take it inside, and then I suppose like instead of looking at kind of that recent history, you go back in ancient times, and the bogwood was really our sacred trees, So then, really for me, you look back in like pre-Christian Ireland, and that's where I get a lot of the inspiration for our work.
And that work that you do is quite diverse, because you do jewellery, you do commissions, including sculpture for public bodies and private clients. You do wish stones, and I'll come back to those in a second. And your latest addition to the collection is a range of diffusers using the bog oak. Tell us about the wish stones first. They're not really stones; they look like stones. But they're engraved.
I think they happened by accident, in the sense that the big thing, I suppose, for me is that it takes us so long to dry the wood, and if you take then, I just see it all as so precious. The offcuts are precious, so they become, I suppose, easy in a way to say, I'm going to make something that's wearable. But the wish stones happened where it was the idea of just holding something and drawing on the kind of the strength of the oak, and the yew is wisdom, and you just hold it, and it's very polished, and yet it's natural, and you just, I suppose it kind of connects you back through the wood.
Bit
Back.
like the worry beads
It
that
is,
you see
very
sometimes
much,
in other
yeah.
cultures. Yeah, it's tactile.
And then I suppose I like, sometimes you write messages, you engrave messages for people. Then I get asked, to put in a message that has meaning for the person. And again, I think people like what you're saying, Claire, it's connecting back personal.
Mm-hmm.
And so various collections have had, say Irish sayings or messages. And then I suppose I've got even letters like back from people who have given them as gifts and that they've had an impact on the person. That's that's kind of the magic of making, isn't it? That you impact on people's lives in a really nice way.
Do you find that, Claire, as well, that people come back to you afterwards and say, that the piece was transformative, or it took them further than they imagined?
Yeah, no, I get messages, from people. Someone actually made me a few years ago. I made a one piece for her, and the lady gave it to her, and the lady who ended up getting it, she ended up knitting me a little shawl to say thanks. It was just completely out of the blue and stuff.
Yeah. Now, the new diffusers. What does the bog oak have? Some special properties that makes it suitable for use as a diffuser? Like, does it hold the oil?
Yeah, I guess the wood is very dense, so it's kind of like bogwood is so dense. There's it's like stone, really. That's why it's kind of like a stone. So in a sense, I suppose like the diffusers are held in ceramic or glass. So for about 3 years, I've been putting oils to see is there any change in scent. And because of the natural fissures in the wood, it holds it and it just diffuses the scent very gently. So it's a really, I suppose for me, it's kind of like, again, using all this, our senses, like I'm holding this and I'm touching, and then I was kind of thinking, God, sometimes I like things to move. So, I've kind of not propelled, you hold it in such a way. And then it was like, how do I get scent? And the scent is lovely because you're holding it or you're leaving it, and then there's
the
natural
warmth
oil.
of your hand
Yeah.
is also, I suppose, helping to diffuse it, is it?
Or you can just leave it and it's just
on a table or whatever, and it's just in the warmth of the atmosphere it's in.
Yeah.
And you use natural oils.
Natural oils. Yeah.
You use natural oils too. You've got one special natural oil product.
Facial oil, yeah.
Facial oil.
Yeah.
So what's so special about that? What kind of oils do you use?
There's a litany of oils. They're all there's avocado. There's a lot of combination of oils that come together specifically for your skin and to help going back again to people with eczema or issues with their skin. I had one lady. She used it with a cleansing balm. I have a cleansing balm as well, and she had just red patches. She could never get rid of them. So I gave her some as a sample to try, and she came back. She was absolutely astonished. She was nearly like scraping the bottom of the when she
Got the last of it out.
Yeah, she said it's nearly like her what did she call it? Liquid gold. That's what she called it. So for her and to have that reaction that for me, that's what it's all about. To have somebody come back and it does something for their skin.
So that's that rosacea effect that you're talking about, that redness of the skin.
Yeah.
So you have eczema, rosacea. Anything else that you've found
I
a wonder cure for?
No, generally it just keeps your skin in good health. It's full of antioxidants, vitamins, everything that's skin loving. For oils for your skin. So it was great for me to have that feedback. When you're creating or formulating these oils. The cleansing balm was the most popular in trials because it was very versatile. You could have it as a cleansing balm as such. It would emulsify. You could leave it on overnight. You could use it as a mask. It had a lot of uses for. You could even put it on under mix it in with a moisturizer, a tiny bit to have. So there was a lot of uses for that. So.
You're all very creative in your own way. Was creativity encouraged when you were all in school, or did somebody tell you to get a real job? Yes, it was encouraged. Yes, to get a real job.
Yes, it was. You could do that in your spare time. go learn something useful. Yeah.
How did you find, Anne-Marie, when you were in school? Were you encouraged to think creatively and to think of a creative job?
I love creating, even down to home economics. Like home economics in school, I used to love creating cakes and buns and the display. Everyone would gather around the table and your Christmas offerings for home economics. I absolutely loved it. But as well like that, I had to go and get a real job in accounts and keep it as a hobby, you know. So, but it's you always come back to what you love, and if you have the opportunity, it's even better to be able to create again. So,
Claire, you studied. You took several creative courses. You deliberately went on this route. And you expanded into jewellery and so on. So you started with an arts course, is that right?
Yeah, well, Mammy was a dressmaker, so from a young age I was always encouraged. Yeah, then I went off to Limerick to do a degree in printmaking, and then I did a master's in cultural policy and arts management, and then I went off and did a course in jewellery making. So I'm kind of, I've always wanted to do it, and have every now and again you're like, should I get a proper job?
And which part of what you do now do you prefer? Where do you get the most enjoyment? Or do you like the idea that you can be doing one thing today and something different tomorrow?
I like the way that I can move between stuff. I think jewellery at the moment I just like the ideas behind it and stuff, and I do get carried away every now and again, different tangents and stuff, but I do like the idea of having to make a piece of jewellery that means something to someone. I think that's what I like the most about it. I think.
We're very good at jewellery in Ireland, aren't we? We have a lot of jewellers here, you know, and very competent ones as well. Yeah. Helen, what about you? You said you started off as an engineer and then you went out on the bog on a motorbike and then it all fell apart.
Yeah,
Where was the drive to do something with the bog? How did that happen?
Well, going back, I think I didn't really want to be an engineer. I wanted to do architecture, I wanted to do something creative, and I came from a very practical farming background, so that wasn't good. Actually, I remember I did do my portfolio to get into college, but it just wasn't going to happen. And in our house, it was either teaching or maybe engineering. I had a brother who did engineering, teaching. My sisters were teachers, so it was kind of did engineering. And then I suppose the creative side came out in the sense of, engineering is more constructive. There's less creative. So I found a path, I suppose, to utilize that kind of physical, or the idea of the wood is like, we've done quite a lot of large sculptures, so there was quite a lot of technical engineering behind them. Wood is by its own nature very, I suppose, structural. So I was able to draw on that learning that I had, and then
work with the wood
and workshop, kind of setting up the workshop, physical, kind of machinery and stuff like that. And then the creative side, I suppose, evolved over time. It just gave me nearly my own internal permission to do and to find my own voice over a long period of time. So,
and you mentioned those big pieces, the big public sculpture pieces. Do you have a favourite one of those?
Well, actually, probably my favourite would be the one that's in our own village.
In Ballinahound.
Yeah, which is, it was the Globe. We did that as our Millennium piece, and that was in 1999. We did a very large one. I suppose some of the liturgical work we've done in some of the churches. I found that Pulla Church is one we did, the altar and tabernacle and ambo, and I suppose like that, if they were, I suppose the churches are very quiet, special places, and to actually bring something very ancient and part of our very ancient history back in, or being even allowed to do that in a way, or trusted to do that, was a kind of something that I really cherished.
So it adds to the contemplative space, though,
yes,
bringing something like that in.
Yeah, it does.
Something so ancient and a touchstone way back through our history. And,
And then I guess over time, then yeah, I suppose over time it's just the wood that is so amazing. It's that to get to make a piece, you know, to how do you say, bring your, I suppose, reflective, creative onto something natural, without imposing it, or you know, it's yeah, it's a privilege.
So let's talk a little bit about how you start a new collection or a new product idea. Like, what's your inspiration when you start out? What about you, Anne-Marie? How do you start your new product journey?
I suppose I look at botanicals. For me, I look at herbs and their qualities and their benefits for the skin, and then it opens up a minefield. So you nearly have to stop yourself and there's so many herbs and botanicals that have complementary to the skin. So like calendula, this is the one I started with for my son, with oatmeal. And goat milk is absolutely, it's skin food. There's so many healing qualities for that herb alone, and that's nearly in a lot of products that I make. So that's where I get the inspiration from.
Well, you've said an interesting thing. I'm always amazed at how craft makers struggle with their creativity, because some of them keep creating things but never sell anything. So the discipline is to stop creating and work the formula through and test it and put it out into the market and then go back and start it. Is that the cycle?
Yeah, because when you see the qualities of one herb and then it leads you on to another one, you go, oh my God, you know, it opens up a whole minefield. And next of all, you have to rein yourself in nearly to say, okay, we're going to stick with 1, 2 or 3 maybe, and keep it at that. Yeah. So, and
the beauty business internationally is constantly throwing new things onto the market. Are you at the other end of that spectrum, where you bring special pieces that don't need to be replaced but need to be cherished and used over a longer period of time?
Yeah, absolutely. You go back to, I think for me, I went back to nature, and the herbs even that I use are tried and tested over. They're years old. I mean, there's lots of new products coming on, and they're only being discovered, and that's coming down through the line. Like it's opened up a whole minefield of botanicals, and that's something it's going to be taken over. I think natural products. That's the way everybody.
Well, the whole earth movement is going in your direction right now. Your time is very much of now, isn't it? Yeah.
Absolutely,
yeah. Claire, you're sort of multidisciplinary insofar as you do illustrations, you do the jewelry, you do special commissions. You also do some art yourself. Where does your personal inspiration come from, rather than maybe the inspiration of being commissioned to do a piece to mark somebody else's memory or occasion?
Well, music would be my biggest inspiration, and poetry as well. So that's what I listen to most.
And that's your starting point. And how much of your work is personal, insofar as you would paint for the sake of it, or you'd illustrate for the sake of it, and do you work towards exhibitions or other presentations and expressions of your work?
Well, the exhibition did of the musicians and the portraits, that was kind of that was for me. I just loved. I hadn't painted for a while, so I wanted to get back into it. So I said I'd contact all these musicians and get photos of them and all the rest. And that was kind of my. Oh yeah, that was an exhibition for me, kind of. That was my. And
then you painted from the pictures. And who were the musicians?
So Chris Dignam, Imelda May, Damien Dempsey, Lisa Hannigan, Kronas.
All significant players, yeah. No pun intended. Yeah. And you want to tell us who didn't agree that they're?
Oh, I can't be said. There was one that I was really upset about.
Was there really? Yeah.
He said I met him, and he said yeah. And then when I got in contact with the management, they were like, "No, he's too busy."
Oh.
I was so excited, and I got a book and everything for him to like sign and stuff, and then didn't meet him.
And which one got the best reaction? Which portrait got the best reaction?
As part of that exhibition, I did a portrait of Phil Lynott,
Ah, right, yeah.
and I got a picture of Philomena gave me a few pictures and stuff.
That's his mother.
Is his
Yeah.
mom, yeah. So that was to mark its 70th, so that was probably the most.
Oh, wow. A nice one to do. Yeah.
But all the musicians liked, none of them.
They all like themselves. And
They were
that's
happy.
probably quite a challenge, Hazel, isn't it? You constantly hear, the Queen's been painted by somebody, but it's never going to see the light of day and all this nonsense.
Yeah.
Hazel, what about you for your personal work? Where do you find your inspiration for
Well,
that?
I always start with sketching. I draw. I'm part of a drawing group, so it's a skill that you have to practice to keep growing. So it's always from observation, from life, and then the challenge is to tell stories. So if you can capture a story or a theme or something, and portray that.
Yes, you infuse a lot of your work with stories, don't
Yeah.
you? So sometimes it'll be figurative and there'll be a story behind the people in the.
Yeah, usually women. I've grown with the drawing group to include men, but it was I don't know why, but it was.
Yes, we're in the minority here this evening as well. Yeah.
Yeah, but and also it's easier to get women models, to draw from, and to work. And I suppose it's the stories of women that touch me more, that I enjoy more. Historical stories, ones that you can, and you have to do a bit of digging. The men's history stories are handed to you, but the women's stories you usually have to dig for. If the information is there.
Really, I thought it would have been the other way around, that the men would be very reticent to give away of themselves,
Yeah, but other men write about them.
Oh.
So you get.
So the question of research.
It's research. Yeah, you have to research and you have to learn, and that's always very interesting. And then you can tinge that with backgrounds or colours or women from the 20s. I don't know whether it's the stories or the clothing. Or just the style that they had. It was 20s, 30s, 40s. Love the women from that.
You love that.
Yeah, love.
And I know you've done some exhibition work. So tell us a little bit about that. What was your most successful exhibition, and why do you think that was?
Well, the most successful, and it was really quite surprising. I took on one of the 1916 stories. And I chose a woman from my local town who went to the same school as I did. So it was kind of a good base. And she wasn't there, and none of her family are there. So I thought, it's grand. It gives me a lot of leeway to.
I won't be sued here.
No. And but then during the research, I found out that a girl I went to school with now works with the grandson of the woman that I was researching. So okay, she had no family in Dublin, and they had access because of the life that she led. So I had access to all this, and the exhibition just grew. It grew to tell the story, a much wider story than I realised it did. So that was lovely. So pieces were bought by the council and heritage offices, and so yeah, it's lovely. And I printed a lot of that. I painted it mostly in watercolour. And then I created some prints and printed them on Irish linens. So that was my favourite so far.
Very good. Helen, we've seen one or two examples of what I call almost ready-made product that people can go on your website, they can buy the stones, and now they'll be able to buy the diffusers. But let's just talk for a moment about your approach to maybe commissions. When somebody comes with an idea, somebody wants a trophy maybe, or something to commemorate. How much of you is in that, and how much of them is in it? And is that sometimes a struggle for you, or is there a conflict there where you earnestly believe it should go in this direction and they're pulling in another direction? Or how do you resolve that conflict?
I think having a body of work behind me makes it easy, in the sense I encourage the person commissioning it to look at what they like in terms of shapes and forms. So it could be like an abstract, very light, willowy, kind of come from maybe Celtic or movement, or it could be birds or say human forms. So that will then kind of inform you where the person commissioning it wants you to go. Do you know what I mean? Do they like the
Yes.
uniform? Is it abstract or natural? And then I think the person is the next part. I love to know about the person, so that you get a sense of what this person is about. So it's mediating between the wood. Sometimes you have a commissioning person, then you actually have the recipient. So you're trying to get a sense of the person receiving, because it's like at the end of the day, that's what it is. And yet it has to be recognizable as part of your work. Do you know what I mean? My own work, but that's where you want to ensure that the person likes the particular style that it's going in. And then the last part, I say there's always a leap of faith, where you take that information you've been given and then you create it. And there's the creative tension then of, will I get it right? And then there's the part when it's handed over, and that's generally lovely, because that kind of waiting and then the feedback, as I said, generally is great, and that's where you're happy.
So there are three people in the equation.
There
There's the commissioner, there's you as the artist or sculptor,
Yeah.
and then there's the person receiving it, all to be considered in the final mix. That's quite interesting, isn't it? Yeah. There's a lot of talk now about sustainability. And I have to say, I personally have a problem when people define sustainability as recycling old J cloths. I think that people like yourself, small enterprises, have a real grasp of sustainability, because you do small production runs and zero waste, and you're careful with your packaging. How have you managed to tackle that in your business, Anne-Marie?
Well, you try to keep everything, even the packaging is all eco-friendly. Even when, even if I get a delivery and I get all this packaging, instead of throwing it out, I recycle it and repackage my boxes. Say if I'm sending out a product, I repackage for filling. So that's one way I would. And everything is eco-friendly. So in that sense.
Very good. Yeah, that's a nice way of handling the packaging that's coming in. So you recycle it to send it back out again.
Yeah.
Clara, what opportunities do you have in that space with materials and that? Can you recycle, reuse?
Yeah, I would recycle and reuse all the metal.
Metals in particular.
Yeah, the offcuts and stuff.
One of the things I'm always fascinated at when I see a jeweler's workbench, it looks like a chamber of horrors with all these large implements and dirty metals and things. And then out of it comes this alchemy, this complete transformation into extraordinary pieces. Do you get people reacting to your workbench like that sometimes? Are they amazed at what you produce from those circumstances?
Yeah, well, like when you're polishing, you look like you just cleaned the chimney. And then, the piece is shiny after. It's it is a very dirty,
process. But out of that comes magic. Hazel, what about you? How are you managing with this whole idea of being more sustainable? And
well, there's no waste from my business, as in. Every piece of material, every piece of silk is used for 30 years. Like my first scarves are still in use. They're all hand washable. They're all they don't wear out.
You're talking about natural fibers, and I was reading this evening, just on my phone, somebody sent me a report, and they were talking about new processes to create these new synthetic fabrics, but the natural ones are the ones like wool, silk, those, and organic cotton, where chemical fertilizers are not used, and so
that's it. My products are silk and paper, so they're natural products, and I don't throw them away. There's nothing to throw away. There's nothing to protect as it's coming through the post either, because they're not breakable. And paints, if you don't use them today, you can use them in 5 years' time. Like they have
a good shelf life for them.
Absolutely, yeah. So by nature, I don't throw anything away, and luckily in my work, I don't need to decide what gets thrown away, because there isn't anything.
And you're a master of the art of recycling, because you're taking wood that's
Yeah.
been lying around for 5,000 years, and that's your basic material.
To be honest, I mean, that was one of the reasons, going right back, about how I chose to move out of doing what I was doing and move down to a rural area and set up, do you know what I mean, the studio and work. And I suppose even in those 30 years, we've used newspapers for packing inside Hessian bags, and we have never used anything other than. So over 30 years, I was kind of thinking of newspaper being shredded and taken out of circulation, and all of that. Like, that's just how we work. And even within the village, all the boxes, apart from my box I get in, the boxes that come in, I use and we send out when we have eco standards. And we literally, as a village, we literally have over 30 years set up a whole process around just recycling every material we have. We don't buy new materials if we can get them out of somebody's yard. And I work very much the same way. I don't buy new unless it's really essential. And having that, I mean, people that would know how we work, I don't feel in any way deprived. I love the creativity of reusing old materials and giving them a new life.
But isn't it important that, particularly after the pandemic, when consumers became much more curatorial, they're asking not what am I buying, but why am I buying it? That they hear these stories, and it's amazing. I'm just watching the comments coming in, and they're all saying, well done, amazing stories, and so on, well done, everyone. Hopefully, this may encourage others to pursue their own craft ideas. I think maybe we've been a little slow to tell our stories as craft makers, and the authenticity of what we do, our sources of inspiration, the way we use natural resources, and the way we use them very, very carefully. Did you find that over the last 18 months there's been a greater appreciation for what you're doing?
Absolutely. I mean, a lot more people are drawn to what's going on around their own surroundings, that they probably wouldn't have noticed before. And because of COVID, a lot of people have gone to local crafters instead of Mr. Internet or Mr. Google to find gifts, even for there was a big surge last year. Where you see people that you've never seen before, and a lot of people are more interested in natural products and eco-friendly products, and where it comes from, how it's made, and to meet the maker and to talk to the person that's creating these is huge as well.
And of course, the local aspect is also very, very useful for retailers. This group, this Craftlink group that's come together, is offering retailers now new sources locally to help them exploit that consumer preference. So, and of course, there's the digital catalogue, which people looking in this evening can avail of, and they can either link straight through to your website, or a retailer can go on and find you there and maybe find something, because you're all doing small batches. Nobody is there's no IKEA here. so nobody's doing anything of that scale. So there's a certain exclusivity to what you do as well. So as we approach the gifting season, what are you recommending to people? What's your favorite gift for Christmas from what you do?
I suppose two things this year would be the diffusers, smaller gifts again, and like I always do a new jewellery collection. So, which I started 10 years ago.
And that's quite that's small and delicate, I would say, in comparison to maybe the chunk of wood you have there. These are beautiful gifts.
For giving gifts and for sending, and again, something very personal.
They can be engraved, can't they, as well?
They can. And so what I've been doing this year is I'm just doing a body of maybe 30 or 40 pieces that I'll put online towards the end of November. And they're just one-offs, and therefore they can sell rather than worrying. People can pick from a collection. So that's one thing, and the diffuser range.
It's a lovely line. This jewellery is 5,000 years old. It's a lovely way. And that it requires a special technique as well, doesn't it? Because when that wood dries, it's not easy to manipulate it and to work on it.
Yeah, it
takes a bit
slow.
of skill.
It takes, and it's slow, and it's kind of like it's slow work, because you're kind of working with stones. There's a kind of Northern Clare, like polishing. There's a lot of hand sanding, polishing, and refining, and but I love it. So it's kind of
And Hazel, what you have special gift packaging?
Yes, I do. And it tells of me, the maker of it. And I find the smaller hand painted scarves are very popular to give as gifts. They're personal, but not too personal. And there's no sizing issues. So
These are the simple little ones that you can tie around your neck. They just
Yeah.
add that little burst of colour.
they're quite long. They're very long, but they fold quite easily, very easily, and tuck in. So it's more about the colour, and it is silk. It's obviously silk, so it's like somebody giving something that they know to be luxurious.
Yes, yeah. There's always been that connotation around
Yeah,
silk.
yeah.
It is the luxury fabric.
Yeah, and that's why it's so nice to work with. I mean, it's just beautiful fabric to work with. The end result is lovely.
And Claire, for Christmas, will you have a stock range, or will you just be doing commissions, or will it be a mix of both?
A mix of both.
Mix of both. So people can go onto your website and they can see a small range of jewellery there that they can buy.
Yeah,
More or less straight.
yesterday, and I'll probably launch one tomorrow.
Oh, coming that quickly.
Some of the new pieces are
New pieces
are
that people won't have
collections
seen before. And tell me this: do you have a favourite metal or material you work in?
I use mostly silver, but I like little dashes of like the yellow gold or rose gold, just little details.
Rose gold's still popular, is it?
Yeah.
It's had quite a run, hasn't it, of late?
Yeah.
It was great on the Irish skin for a while. Everybody liked them, for the engagement rings and stuff. But I just like the contrast and stuff.
And Luna, I call them your macaroons. I presume you'll sell a lot of those.
Yes.
They're little soap bars. Is that
They're
right?
just little soap bars, but they're more innate for gifting at Christmas. It's just a little bit something different. I still have the soap bar as well, but there's gift sets on the website there as well. It's just something a little bit different, and there's something for every budget, I think there. Yeah.
So we've heard all the good stuff now so far. But is every day different? And are there a few disasters in the history of each of these micro enterprises we're hearing about this evening? What was the funniest thing that's ever happened to you?
I don't think they're funny.
Well, when you look back now, it's part of the experience, isn't it?
I lost a whole batch of soap there, even last week. I mean, I'm soaping a long time, but I was trying a new ingredient from a different supplier, and of course I thought it would be the same, and it wasn't, and the whole batch had to go. But
Oh my goodness.
you're still learning. Every day is, so we learned something really good that day. So that's they're funny now when you look back at it, but at the time it was so every day is a learning curve.
What about you, Claire? Any funny stories or disasters or near disasters?
There's always some kind of disaster. I can't think of anything else top of my head.
I remember recently I was working on a program, and we were outlining some of the things that you might do in the course of a season, and this woman said, "Oh my goodness, there's a lot to be done, isn't there?" It was almost like if you do it once, it's taken care of forever. But of course, every day and every season brings its challenge, doesn't it? Hazel, tell us about one or two.
Well, I've learned not to answer the phone when it rings, because particularly if you're working with dyes, because you need to work wet into wet, and you get a totally different finish. If
you answer the phone.
If you answer the phone, get distracted. That's really it. And if I'm working on a commission, I'll do at least 2 at any one time, just to take the pressure off myself, because I hate that pressure of having to get the one thing perfect.
That's an interesting way to,
isn't it?
Yeah. I do the exact same
Do you?
as a learning. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why sometimes somebody will come in and find something really obscure, like a bug body, or just a silhouette of something, and they sort of say, "Why did you do that?" And I said, "Well, actually, it is the second one of something I did for somebody that's there, and invariably find a home, even if it's very specific. And sometimes it can actually lead on to something like a new collection or something."
No, right. So it inspires you to do other work.
Yeah, but you're completely right. Yeah, because.
So in the same vein, what's the best bit of business advice you ever received?
Oh my goodness. If you get a real job. I honestly am taking the advice. Yeah.
Okay, we'll
Yeah.
take that as read. Yeah. What about you, Hazel? Yeah.
Just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it.
Yes,
Yeah.
very interesting. Yeah.
Especially as a creative, because you get distracted. You will try all sorts of things, and I can do this and I can do that, but
Yeah, I was just reminded there when you said not answering the phone, though, and it ties in with this sort of business advice. Was I always think it's better to make a phone call though than send an email. Would you agree with that?
I have a husband that does all the talking for me. I don't actually. I'm very happy to talk to people if they ring me. I have a great difficulty in picking up the phone and talking.
You all have a personal assistant like Hazel. Business advice, we get a personal assistant. Claire, what about, did anyone give you a gem of a nugget of business advice?
Do what you love to do and don't compromise. If someone asks you to do something and you're not 100%, don't do it, and suggest someone else that might be able to do it. It's just, if it's not something that you feel that you can put your whole heart and soul into it, I wouldn't do it. Maybe.
Anne-Marie?
I can't think of anything now on the spot. I suppose.
Like when you started to move from the hobby to the business, was there a moment, or was there a mentor, or was there something that happened that made that transformation just click?
There's always a hesitation, when you're making the transition. I suppose for me was that it was doing something for somebody. That's what made me make the transition. Somebody was getting something from what you were creating, and for me that was the utmost. So that was, I suppose, the best way for me to keep going. Because you're constantly striving all the time to do better, and you're your own worst critic at times as well. So yeah, that's for me, that keeps me going. Yeah.
And Hazel, I'm going to start with you on this one. If you were to give a piece of what you would consider to be good advice to a customer, what would you say to them?
For the scars, I have two customers, one who's buying as a gift and one who's buying for themselves. So it's much easier when you've got the person that's going to wear the piece in front of you, because you're able to see their skin tone, see the way they like to dress, and find out from them, is it a scarf to wear with a particular coat? Is it, that's much easier. So, and with a gift, if they're giving it as a gift, you just have to be more generic. It has to be a simple beauty as opposed to a specific piece.
Helen?
I think I would always say to the person, actually I even see some of my lovely customers online there, but I would always say to them that they're given a gift that reflects them, so they should give something that they really, that speaks to them, so it's their message to the person. So I'm kind of mediating, but in a way the gift they give is a reflection of them, really. So you kind of help them to pick something that's about, obviously thinking about the recipient, but actually has meaning for the person giving it. And then they get lovely feedback too, and it kind of essentially, isn't that what gift giving is, if they're, for a customer, and then for themselves it's easier because they're drawn to something that they really, really like themselves. And again, like that, I would also say to customer, I would like how much we really appreciate them commissioning or picking
You
my
to do
work or whatever. Sure, it's amazing because it could give anything in the world. You can give a person, there's so many fabulous brands, anything, and to choose a maker's work and that's supporting, like me, being able to do what I love every day is brilliant. Like it's.
And Claire, what about you? You people coming to sometimes wanting to create a piece and maybe they're not sure. What do you say to them? What advice do you try to give them to put them on the right track, maybe?
I try to get as much information as possible, and Yeah, so if I get lots of information on what they like and stuff, and then I can pick stuff and see if I can make them work. So then I come up with 1 or 2 designs for them.
So your message would be for them to think it through a little bit before they...
Or just give me as much information as possible, and trust me to come up with some. Well, not trust me, that sounds a bit, but like if I give them a few options, they can go, "Oh, I like that, but maybe with this," you know. So they're quite involved in it.
So you offer them some choices as well and get them to think about alternatives.
Yeah.
What artist or craftsperson do you most admire, Hazel?
My default is our artists. So it would go back to the raw skill of somebody's, say, sketching ability, or if it's clothing, eye for a simple line. You know, I just like the simplicity.
Let's say if I said to you, right, strictly from an art perspective, who's your favorite artist in the whole world? Who would you say?
Well, then I'd go through the different ages of art. But
Hazel's really the politician.
Yeah, well, I mean, you'd have to go to the Rembrandts and the Michelangelos for their absolute. They were so ahead of their time. If you could place yourself in the world that they were living in, that the work that they created was so advanced, given that they didn't have YouTube to Google things on, or photographs to copy, or, you know, things like that. So it's that wonderful observation skill that I admire.
So Rembrandt is one of the ones that springs to mind. It's funny you say that, because I was just reading a book about David Hockney recently, and I think he's a brilliant sketcher as well, and people don't often see what he does with pencil, but he constantly refers back to Rembrandt. You know, amazing, and his painting is very different to Rembrandt's, let's face it. But
it is, but again, it's down to the perspective and the layering. Like he's done a wonderful body of work of piecing together photographs.
Yes, with the 8 cameras on the car, and and all that work he did when he lived in England for that short space of time. The work of the trees, the sketching, fantastic, absolutely.
I think it all comes from observation, and then it's your personal interpretation of that brings something fresh. Everybody can copy. Once it's been done, it is, I'm not saying easy to copy, but it's the fresh work, it's the new perspective that is always wonderful.
Who do you admire as an artist?
Oh, I always look at paintings and stuff. Like for the portrait, there's like Colin Downston is one of my favorite artists.
Oh, yeah.
I love his stuff. But I love watching, there's a documentary on Alexander McQueen. Yeah, and I just love it. I love the way that it's art and fashion together, and it's kind of like he went over the boundaries and he did whatever he wanted. I love it.
Yeah, he certainly did. I can't help recalling that situation where he had the model come out in the white dress and this robot just spray painted a pattern on it during the show. It was quite extraordinary, wasn't it? Yeah. Is there a craftsperson that you admire particularly, Anne-Marie, whether in your own field or in another field? Like, is there somebody like, I don't know, someone like Joe Hogan, or with his baskets, or...
There isn't. There's a combination of a few soap queens. I can't think of one now, but no, sorry, I'm gone blank.
What about the Santa Maria Novella, the original sort of convent in Florence, where they started making all those beautiful soaps and apothecary products? And have you come across that one, or would you lean towards somebody maybe more locally?
More locally, I get my inspiration from soapers that are now. So you do a lot of online research, and there's a couple on there that I would follow and get inspiration from. But no, not the old ones. No.
Yeah, Joseph Walsh, I suppose, down in
Oh,
Cork.
down in Kinsale, yeah.
His wood sculptures are...
And his €75,000 beds. And yes.
They're amazing. In McCain, as a wood turner, I because I just think he has taken, I suppose, like that, taken turning and created, kind of sculpture pieces. Then Joe Hogan, Joe is just, I would know Joe, well, I did one of his courses years and years ago.
Yeah. Extraordinary.
And I
Basket
just
maker, beyond basket making though,
to sculpture. And I suppose like that, it's taken honest materials, isn't it, and transforming them into actually art. And I really like Glenn Lucas's approach. Glenn has a woodworking school, and he's taken and just excelled in just production of wood, and and educating people how to use it. And then Michael Bell, he's furniture. So like, I suppose I'd be, but I would also love, as I say, if you take, say the likes of Alexander McQueen, or like, and even some of the old Barbara Hepworth, Henry Moore, again, form, shapes, and I suppose if I go away, I just love going to, or I would travel to see exhibitions and be inspired by them. Doesn't matter where, a different city where there's exhibition, and I like to travel to see exhibitions, to be honest.
Sometimes it's nice too just to go to some of those cities and discover it by accident, not go there with the intention of visiting an exhibition, but all of a sudden there's one there in front of you and you just wander in.
Yeah, and that can be from contemporary, to, as I say, and just spending half a day, and you get a really good sense of a city, or of town even, or culture by that. And then I think that's nearly by osmosis, or you might do a few sketches, or I love to, but it's just maybe get 2 postcards or 3 postcards or 5, and just bring them back and have a collection of postcards from, over 20, 30 years of just exhibitions, and it's lovely.
I'm sorry I didn't hear you talk about postcards before I got involved with books, because there's not a lot of room in my house now. Yeah, postcards would have been easier. I'm trying to encourage people to put a question into Eddie, where can we find the products? Well, online, and we'll give you the addresses in a moment. Everybody is being very complimentary, but I suppose if anyone has a question they want to put in, we've a few minutes left, and in part I'm going to fill that few minutes with this question: what would your teenage self think of your direction and achievements to date, Anne-Marie?
Oh, why didn't I start earlier? Because I think when you're young, you're so driven to accomplish something, or you want education, and you're driven to the normal scale of things. Get your education, get your house, and get your this. It's a race. And when you get older, you tend to stop and sit back and go, no, that's not what I actually want to do, and delve into what you really wanted to do. So to myself, I would say, you should have done it. You should have listened to yourself earlier. But the internet is great. Years ago, you didn't have a lot of the education. Now you can just go online and find out how to do nearly everything that you want to do. So that sense, it's better. But yeah, that's what I would say.
What about you, Claire?
I don't know, because I kind of decided that at a young age I wanted to be an artist or an engineer.
Would your teenage self be pleased with you now?
I'd probably say I'd take more chances. Like I chanced my arm lots of times, and I probably would have been a bit shyer to do it, and now I just chance my arm.
Do it, yeah. So she might have encouraged you to do that more often.
Yeah. Maybe.
Hazel?
My teenage self made lots of clothing, so it's really quite funny that I've come back around. It took me a while, but I've come back around. But yet, clothing I used to make all sorts of things, and then got on. Life became busy, and I dropped that. It's funny.
So
how
would
it's
she
come
say,
around.
why did you stop?
Yeah. Yeah, what happened?
Yeah.
But I think I went through a very conservative style period of life, and now I'm I'm not quite as relaxed as my teenage self, but I'm getting there.
Moved on to making dresses you might get arrested
Yes.
in. Yeah.
Yes.
Helen, what about you? What would your teenage self say now if she walked in the door here?
I'd run away from boarding school much sooner. Oh my God. Yeah, no, we hadn't a clue. So I'm just so glad that we, you know, if you were a teenager now rather than a teenager back then, you know, there's a lot more freedom to do what you want now and a confidence. So I'd say go with your gut instinct and kind of follow what you love rather than kind of, yeah.
Now, have we anything on the questions? No, all just compliments, as far as I can see. So I do have a couple of things though that may be of use to everybody. Before I go to those, Christmas is coming. Do you have special gift wraps, or how are you handling that? People go on your website. What will they find there in terms of Christmas?
Well, the Christmas gifts in themselves, there'll be free shipping, which is a big plus. And there's also, I was going to put a little Christmas card as well for gifting. So I thought that would be a nice touch. Yeah.
Yeah, all my pieces are gift wrapped, and I have Christmas cards coming out in a few days.
Oh, you're designing a range of Christmas cards as well?
Yeah.
Oh, very good. Excellent. Very nice. And Hazel?
Again, it's the gift
Gift
wrapping. Yeah. Last year was wonderful for online local orders. So I think I'll learn. I'll just do the wrapping and the cards and
your gift boxes are lovely
gift
anyway.
boxes,
So
yeah.
if it ain't broken, don't fix it.
Yeah.
And you, Helen?
Yeah, I gift wrap. And then Gail Kelly, she does elegant arts. She does lovely woodcuts of trees. And I've just stocked up on them. I'm not making them Claire, but unlike Claire, to go out with each.
With each,
Yeah,
each gift.
yeah.
So your website. What's your website?
www.lunasoap.ie.
And Claire?
Yes, ClaireGuinan.com.
hazelgreen.ie.
CelticRoots.ie. Yeah.
And if you want to find out more, of course, there's all of the information about the local makers on craftlink.eu on the website. You'll find the digital catalogue there as well that I mentioned earlier. And it's a brilliant interactive catalogue because you just click on the website and it takes you straight there to any one of the makers involved in these sessions. And before you sign off this evening, we'd also recommend that you register on the Craftlink YouTube channel, because if you do that, you'll receive updates about new broadcasts, and there'll be some regular posts and videos and more information. So I hope you enjoyed the chat. I certainly did. I want to say thank you to our four guests this evening, to Anne-Marie and Claire and Hazel and Helen. And thank you all for watching. And when it comes, happy Christmas. Thank you. We're out.